So, what does a grieving young child look like? Well, totally depends on the kid. Children will grieve in all sorts of different ways, just like adults do. But there are some things to look out for that are pretty common, especially for very young children, given their developmental stage. One of those things is just moody, clingy, tantrumy. So, a child who's just having a hard time regulating their emotions and their behavior. They're seeming kind of up and down, or easily frustrated, or wanting to be close all the time. They might just be feeling that loss really intensely and feeling really anxious, or scared, or unsafe. They might be worried that other people in their lives are suddenly going to disappear or go away, and that could be making them feel anxious. They might have all sorts of feelings inside of them that they're not quite sure how to process or understand, that just make them feel kind of ruffled up and upset, and so they might be acting that way. And sometimes, as we know as adults, sometimes those feelings just kind of come from out of nowhere, right? They didn't come from out of nowhere, they came from somewhere in us, but sometimes they surprise us, and that happens with young children too. So sometimes they're kind of doing okay, and their behavior is pretty stable, and then all of a sudden they kind of have a downturn, and they're just having a really hard time. They're frustrated, they're upset, they're crying a lot. So lots of different things in terms of how they express their emotions. Kids also might, rather than sort of expressing sadness or crying or frustration, is they might be really angry. They might be giving you a really hard time, or they might be having really difficult or aggressive behavior, right? They might be feeling really obstinate or wanting to say no to everything, right? This is also sometimes an expression of fear or anxiety, and they're trying to protect themselves and somehow grasp at any bit of safety that they can. And sometimes that comes out in ways that can be strange or surprising or really just downright difficult for us as the adults in their lives that have to take care of them. So just keeping an eye out for that and reminding yourself as much as you can that this is a child who's grieving. They're not doing a bad job, and there's nothing wrong with them, and you're not doing a bad job, and there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that they're grieving, and you may be grieving too. So things to be aware of. Very young children also might, as I said, be really clingy, have a harder time separating from other adults because death is a form of extreme separation, and they might be very sensitive to separation in general after a death. They might ask a lot of questions or the same question over and over and over. Something about the person or about the death, just to sort of check that reality. This is something that young children do all the time. It's how they learn. They bump up against something and find out what's there. They bump up against it and find out what's there. They bump up against it and find out what's there, and then eventually they're like, oh, that's there. Got it. Right? So they might ask the question over and over, what happened to this person? Where are they? Where did they go? Are they coming back, right? And these questions can be really provocative and difficult for us if we're grieving too, because it can be hard to be reminded all the time that that's what's happening. So if you feel comfortable to be able to handle that, if that's something that's happening with the child that you're taking care of, then you can do that and answer their questions with as much compassion and patience as possible. And if not, seeing if you can reach out for help to another adult who's going to be able to be more compassionate or patient because they're not in their own grief right now. And that's okay too. Right? So just knowing what is here and what you can handle are really, really important skills. Another thing that you may see with very young children when they're grieving is that they lose skill that they actually had already developed. And this is normal. It's called skill regression. You may see it with the way that they're walking or their physical coordination. You may see it with their speech and language development, with their talking. You may see it with their toileting and how able they are to control their bowels and going to the bathroom, if that's something that they've already learned how to control. So a lot of times when kids are anxious, those skills that are just newly developed, they slide back because their focus just can't be on them anymore. And this is also normal. So it's hard as someone who's taking care of them to watch a child not be able to do the things that they were necessarily able to do already. But just remembering that these are new skills, that they are learning so much as very young children all the time. And that when there is a significant loss and there's a lot of feelings that are being processed by a young child, oftentimes some of those sort of surface skills that are newer, they get sacrificed for that stage. It doesn't mean they won't come back. Or even that it will last very long, and they may come back very easily, or they may need to repeat that learning process. But that is also a normal part of this experience for young children. Okay, so being aware of that as well. And the last thing I want to just invite you to think about is that kids will often also not only have questions about the person or the experience, but they may have questions about mortality in general and death, specifically around themselves. They may be asking about what it means for them, and are they going to die as well? Right? And so just as we talked about speaking as concretely and simply and clearly as possible, and honestly with them, is really, really important here. You're safe. And we've got you. And everybody dies at some point, but you're very young and you have a long life to live. Right? So being encouraging, being simple, and being containing, because that, again, can be a really scary or anxiety-provoking thought. Like, if this person can die, then what about all the other people in my life? Could they also die? Or what about myself? And again, normalizing death as a part of life, and also recognizing that that person was much older than them, and that they, as a young child, have a long life to live. This can be, of course, complicated if the person who died was actually quite young. And so then there's going to be a bit more nuance in that conversation around different people dying at different times. Then we can talk more about that if that's something that's needed.